If you've ever stopped writing a book or a story because you just think it's not good enough, or you lose motivation along the way, then I'm talking to you in this video, okay? For those of you that are new here, hi, I'm Ollie. I'm currently writing my first novel, which is a fantasy story called Echo's Reach. I'm almost at the end of this first draft of the book, and I'm feeling quite reflective over the process. I was thinking about how I've been calling this the first draft of the book this entire time. If you've watched other videos of mine, you'll know as I catalogue the progress of writing it, I always talk about how it's the first draft. And that is true, but it's also kind of a lie. There was a first draft before this one. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. It's the idea of having a draft 0 or a draft 0.5 or something. Basically a draft of your book that comes before your actual first finished draft. Now, if you look around the internet, of which YouTube is a part, you might hear people talking about draft 0. It's not something I gave too much thought to before. In my head, I'd always imagined what I now realize was my draft 0 to be kind of like a failed first draft of a book that never got written. But actually, there's a lot of ideas and themes and settings, and especially characters, that were born in that draft 0. Okay, so what is a draft 0? I'd call draft 0 the draft of the book where the book itself figures out what it wants to be. This is the version of the story that you tell yourself. It's the version that you just kind of dump on the page. You don't worry about it sounding perfect or polished or even whether or not it makes sense or not. You just get it down because you need material to work with in order to write a good story. And quite often it starts with just this massive stuff that you just got to get out onto the page. Draft 0 is fun. It's not meant to hold you down. It's meant to sort of get the engine going. It's meant to lower the stakes of your writing process. Because I know for myself, like I wrote the first chapter of this book over and over again, sort of over like basically a 5 or 6 year period. And the first sort of like 5 to 10,000 words, I just kept on stopping, going back and just starting again. And that's really the most important thing about it. It just gets you going. It gets you past that sort of perfection paralysis that can hold you back from actually doing anything at all. Someone once said, you can't edit a blank page. It's literally just meant to get you going, basically. Because you have to remember, as Hemingway said, the first draft of anything is shit. And you have to be okay with just writing something that's really, really bad. Because I might still be. I don't know. I haven't had many opinions about what I'm currently writing. But yeah, I recommend if you're someone out there who's trying to write their first book and you find yourself just kind of stopping after a certain amount of pages, or you stop after the first chapter and just go back and you keep on doing that, I really recommend trying a draft 0 because there's no pressure at all. You can just keep on writing. Don't be afraid to include like placeholders even in parts of the story where you find yourself getting bored or you're losing interest. Just stop. You can just stop and then move on to a bit that you find interesting. That's what I've done. It's kind of also part of embracing the fear and the uncertainty that you have of getting this idea that feels perfect in your head and getting it out into the world, because there's always that fear that it's just not going to be that perfect gem that you have in your imagination. And it really helps with kind of getting over that. And you have to get over that if you're actually going to finish it. I'm aware I'm speaking as someone who still hasn't quite finished a book, but I'm on about 114,000 words and I'm on the second to last chapter, and I just feel the momentum, but it took years to get that momentum going. And it really started with draft 0. So my draft 0 story, it starts really back in 2016. So 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago. I was working at the Science Museum in London. And the Science Museum was a great place to work. You were surrounded by all these amazing things, these amazing people coming in. I got to meet an astronaut when I worked there briefly. Bill Gates came in. All kinds of people, were just sort of milling about there sometimes. I was basically reading at the Science Museum about these people who watch out for forest fires. They live deep in the woods in these huts which are on stilts above the tree line, and they basically just spend their days looking out for smoke on the horizon. Just something about that story like planted this tiny seed for this idea, and it's amazing how much that's expanded, because you would never guess that that's what inspired this story if you were to read what I've actually written. And so I started writing it, and it started off as this hard sci-fi story, and I got about 50,000 words into this draft, what I now call draft 0, and something about it just didn't quite feel right anymore. I wrote that 50 or 60,000 words, I can't remember exactly how much, but I wrote that between sort of 2016 and 2018, so over a couple of years or so, off and on. I did a lot of working out of who the characters were, what the main sort of like world was that this story took place in. And as I wrote, my gut just started telling me, this doesn't quite feel right. There's a lot that's right in the story, but this particular story doesn't quite feel right anymore. But I didn't want to give up because it was the longest thing I'd ever written, and I was determined, as I am now, to finish this book. But it was just the wrong book. But I still kept writing because I realized that there was a lot that I was still working out, and it was helpful to write this story because I could just sort of test out ideas and characters, that kind of thing. The main moment came when I finished this one chapter and I read back and I realized, and I don't know if this will make sense, but I realized that this book is just stuff happening. It's just one thing happening after another. I asked myself, what's the core of this story? What's the heart of it? What's pulling everything along? And I didn't know what the answer was. And it was kind of devastating at the time because I'd done so much and I really thought that this was going to be a full book. But I had to just stop. So I stopped writing it and I put it away in my digital drawer in Scrivener, and that was it. I put it to sleep. But there was something about the core world and characters of that story that I really wanted to come back to. And so I just let it sit for a while, and then the pandemic happened. And during that first couple of months of the pandemic in 2020, I was at home and I just wanted to start writing again. So I went back to that book, and crucially, I didn't reread it. I just went back to it in my mind and looked in my mind for anything from that draft that stuck out to me, like anything. It's like little lights in the dark, like what was it that I remember from that draft 0? And those things that stuck out are the things that I kept, and I lost everything else. Most of the science fiction stuff. There was a lot of stuff that took place in space that doesn't happen anymore. Actually, most of the characters I dropped. The main character I reworked, and yeah, some of the core characters I kept. A lot of them were gone. And so I started writing this current draft in 2020. And to be honest, even the first sort of 6-7 chapters of this current draft, I still didn't really know what the heart was, but I felt in my gut that there was something else there in this version of the story that was missing from the draft 0 version of the story. And it was worth pursuing, and it was worth doing the work to find out what it was. And I've talked about it before in other videos, but there was a moment a couple of years ago when I finally realized what the heart of the story was and what it all really meant. And as soon as I found that, like, my writing speed just sped up like crazy. And that's because, as I said, I finally found out what the story was really about, like at its core. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, draft 0, it's a bit like panning for gold. You scoop up a whole load of dirt and you just got to do the actual physical work of shaking all the dirt away. In this case, writing big long draft of a book that will never see the light of day. And hopefully as you do that physical work, you find these little nuggets of gold. I feel like this is particularly good advice for writers who are like me, like gardeners or pantsers. They don't spend ages before they start writing, plotting out detail by detail what the story's going to be. That's not me. I figure it out as I'm going. I let the book kind of figure itself out as I'm writing it. And it also lets you just practice writing, which is always good. I was just reading back some of my draft 0, which I haven't done since I stopped. And I feel like I've gotten better. I don't know. I must have done. I've done so much more since then. I don't know. Some of it's just a bit ropey, and I'm glad that no one's ever going to see it. But I just think it's really important when you're in the first sort of opening throes of writing your story. You just need to give it this massive sandbox to just work itself out, because there's a lot which you might be really attached to now and you think is going to work really well. But once you actually put it in the book and start writing with those ideas, start playing with those ideas, sometimes it shows that those are the ideas which you can drop, or they don't work as well. And I'm constantly surprised still, like even yesterday when I was doing some writing, at the things which just come out of nowhere while I'm writing, stuff I could never have planned. If I can't imagine planning this book chapter by chapter before I even started. I don't know how people do that. I kind of wish I could do that, because I think I'd be much quicker. But I think I'll leave it there today. I didn't have too much of a writing update because I'm just in the trenches at the moment, just trying to finish this draft. It's going really well, I will say that. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really pleased with where it's going. Like I was saying, I'm at about 114,000 words now, I think. My goal is 120. I think that's probably going to be quite accurate. But yeah, it's going really well. Hopefully I'll have more details to share soon. As I talked about last time, I'm going to soon start writing these short stories, these little vignettes based in the world of this novel. Not necessarily connected to this novel, but just sort of something that can paint the picture of where this book is taking place. But those are going to be on my Patreon, I think, which I'm going to revamp. So keep an eye on that. I'll put the link down in the description. Also, if you watch my other videos, you'll know that I quite like, because I work from home, I like to get out the house, and I like to get out the house to do writing. It gets me in a different frame of mind. I like to go to a coffee shop. I go to the library quite a lot, but it does mean I buy quite a lot of coffee. So if you'd like to support this way of life, there's a link in the description where you can buy me a cup of coffee. If you want to do that, that would be great. Might even get the book finished quicker. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Consider writing a draft 0. It's really good fun. Don't show it to anyone because you'll be embarrassed. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.